We're going to go ahead and call this December 4th meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for attending both in person and remotely via Teams. I would like to invite Richard and Suzanne to lead us in the pledge this evening together. Thanks you both. Our first item on the agenda is our oaths of offices. I will take the oath first from Michelle, our city clerk and administrative director, and followed by Frank Sweeney, Steve Quinnell, and Rebecca Norton. Congratulations to all three of you on your election.
Not happening.
I said that last time, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and raise your right hand and repeat after me.
I, John Mulfeld, as mayor of the city of Whitefish, Montana,
Do solemnly
swear that I will support,
protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity, so help me God. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Francis. His hip is fine, he just has a slight pull. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Francis Sweeney,
I, Francis Sweeney,
as City Councilor of the City of Whitefish,
as City Councilor of the City of Whitefish,
Montana, do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
I do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Montana,
the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity, so help me God.
with fidelity, so help me God.
Congratulations, Frank.
Thank you so much.
And Steve, you're up. You got a cheat sheet. Okay. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Steve Quinnell, as City Councilor of the City of Whitefish,
I, Steve Quinnell, as a City Councilor of the City of Whitefish,
Montana,
Montana,
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States,
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Montana,
Constitution of the State of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
Congratulations, Steve. And last but certainly not least, Rebecca. Congratulations, Rebecca.
Thank you. To you too, John.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Okay.
I, Rebecca Norton, as City Councilor of the City of Whitefish, Montana,
I, Rebecca Norton, as City Councilor of the City of Whitefish, Montana,
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States,
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Montana,
the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity,
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations, Rebecca. Thanks, everyone. Oh, yeah. Leave this for the public. Shifting gears here, we'll move on to item 3B of our agenda. We do have a presentation this night from Sal Baccaro regarding the 911 memorial proposal at the Emergency Services Center. Sal, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Sal Baccaro. I am one of your local firefighter paramedics. And because of that, I get the opportunity to serve this community in a very direct way on a regular basis. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. I'm also the vice president of the Whitefish Firefighter Association, which is a nonprofit, and the Whitefish Firefighters Association is who I will be representing in this meeting. Through the Whitefish Firefighter Association, we formed the 9/11 Memorial Committee, which consists of a board of individuals in charge of steering the 9/11 Memorial Project. And that brings me to why I'm here. A little history on this project. In 2010, the Whitefish Fire Department obtained, we can actually wait on the first slide for a second here. In 2010, the Whitefish Fire Department obtained 3 large pieces of steel from the World Trade Center through the Port of Authority of New York and New Jersey. The purpose of obtaining the steel was to have a 9/11 memorial built with the steel. The original proposed location was at the Emergency Services Center. There was effort to have the memorial built, but unfortunately there were some unforeseen circumstances and the project was not completed. You go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So that brings me to our goals as the 9/11 Memorial Committee. The number one goal is to build the 9/11 Memorial with authenticated steel artifacts from the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. We want to preserve the memory of the brave and innocent victims who lost their lives on September 11, 2001. Provide a place to acknowledge the sacrifices that 343 firefighters, 72 police officers, and 8 emergency medical technicians made in service to others on 9/11. We want to build a landmark that will be an inspiration to all who visit and a tribute to all whose lives were lost. And we want to display historical artifacts from America's history and educate those who may not know about the tragedy that happened on 9/11. And in some later slides, I'll talk a little bit about the educational aspect of this project. Our goal is to have the project completed on 9/11/2026, and that would be the 25th anniversary of 9/11. Next slide. Some of the positives of this project: there are very few memorials outside of New York that honor the sacrifices made by first responders on 9/11, and even fewer that include authentic steel artifacts from the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. I believe there's one in Montana that actually has steel, and that's at MSU Billings, so it's quite a ways away. The 9/11 Memorial is a gift to the public and will be available for viewing year-round to all individuals regardless of demographic or economic status. The 9/11 Memorial will be used as an educational tool for those who did not experience or were too young to remember the event. And how we want to implement that is by using like QR codes around the project so that people can scan and learn about the event. Our first responders will pass by this landmark each time they respond to emergency calls, and the 9/11 Memorial will serve as a reminder to stay safe. As first responders, we're exposed to very traumatizing things on a regular basis. And this landmark is a symbol of strength, honor, and brotherhood. This public landmark will be available to residents and to the thousands of visitors that come to the Flathead County year-round. This project will be solely funded through fundraising efforts. The Whitefish Firefighter Association Board is run by volunteers and has the 9/11 Memorial Committee that'll steer the project. If you could go to the next slide. So these next few slides are renderings that we work closely with White Cloud Design on. So they built all of these images so that you can kind of see what that space could look like or what it'll turn into. Right now it's just some basic landscape with young maple trees and a sign that says Emergency Service Center. So if you just slowly click through the next couple slides, we could show everyone. Slide. So you can kind of see we'd have the steel as the centerpiece. I think that's really the goal, is we want to erect the steel kind of in the center of this space and really bring the focal point around that steel because it is a 9/11 memorial. And of course, keep it beautiful and make sure it fits Whitefish. Next slide. We would include some flagpoles and a lot of vegetation as well. Next slide. You can kind of see the space there with the ESC, or the Emergency Service Center in the back and the parking lot off to the left. So it's just that space that we have right there, and it's pretty a blank canvas right now. So it's really a great location for this project. Next slide. I'd add a double in there. Access for all. There's a rendering of it in the winter as well. Originally we had a water feature in the middle, but after some discussion, we determined that we'd take that out, kind of going away from those. So, so there's no water feature in this project. The one stream that you did see on the far side over there is really just drainage. There's already rock there for storm drainage, and it kind of looks something like that with a little touch up. But next slide. So in conclusion, we're requesting City Council to approve the use of city property and to allow the construction of the 9/11 memorial. Once again, there is no financial requirement to the city, and the city will not be responsible for annual maintenance costs. Like I said, this is something that the Whitefish Firefighter Association will completely fundraise for all aspects of this project.
Thanks very much, Sal. Any
Yeah, absolutely.
questions?
Any questions?
Rebecca? Yep.
What was you said the timeline is in
So our goal is 2026, 9/11 2026, and that gives us tons of time to fundraise and to have the project done. We really kind of targeted that date because it is the 25th anniversary, and it allows a lot of time. Originally, the timeline was a lot sooner, but we just decided to push that back quite a bit.
how much money do you need to fundraise?
You know, with that current, with like that project, I think it was around 1.2 or to 1.5 million. But
A beautiful design.
yeah, and that is one thing. You know, it's that amount that we'll have to fundraise, but also it's very fluid, so we can change the design as we need depending on fundraising and depending on the economy, right? So it really depends on how much money we could get in. But the whole purpose of this is we want to get that steel erected in in that space, and so that people can cherish it outside of the fire station. Right now it's sitting on casters in the fire department. So
Further questions or comments? I just have a couple. I just wanted to thank Saul personally for bringing this forward. I remember when the steel was actually delivered, it was ages ago.
yeah.
So this is long overdue, and I personally lost quite a few friends in 9/11. I grew up on the Connecticut coast and recall traveling home from Whitefish after the towers went down, and I could stand on the beach where I grew up, and it was still obviously smoking. And long time overdue. I appreciate this. It'll be a great memorial to those that we lost, and we certainly appreciate it on behalf of the council and the entire town, for that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you
Really
very much.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Dana, you had comments before we turn it over to Daniel?
I think if you could just take a vote and give us a yes that you're willing to dedicate that city property. It's still going to technically be owned by the city. It'll be, we'll maintain with the fire association pretty easily. It's the design. I was included at least, initial when it had the water feature to now. So, yeah, I'm happy. I recommend that we move forward with the
Thanks very much.
request.
Giuseppe, motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm honored to move to approve the availability to the organization for the 9/11 memorial. Thank you, Sal.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. I neglected to indicate that Councilor Fury is excused from the meeting this evening. He is traveling back from Vietnam as we meet. With that said, we'll move on to item 3C, which is a housing Whitefish presentation, an update from the Whitefish Workforce Housing Fund from Daniel Sider, and we will hear that presentation now. Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilors. Yes, Daniel Sitter, Housing Whitefish, with here to present an update on the Whitefish Workforce Assistance Program. You'll notice that is the first change you'll see is program, not fund. We just felt like calling it a fund was maybe a little bit more confusing. It's a program. So it is the Whitefish Workforce Assistance Program. I trust that you've seen the slides in the packet, and really just want to talk through some of the changes that we've made and some of the feedback that we've received. If we can go to the next slide, Michelle. I think there's so again, the program goal, help full-time employees successfully live and work in the Whitefish area by providing rental assistance to retain housing and to get into new housing units. So this remains our primary goal for the program. A couple of the smaller changes that we've made. So originally we came to you with 120% of the AMI going up on the high end. We have adjusted that down to 100% of the AMI. Just through conversations with our board and the community, just really felt like we're going to prioritize already through the weighted scoring folks on the lower income scale. And so just really felt like we wanted to focus on the folks that had the highest economic need in the community. So that was just something that our board felt was important. So that was one item. And then just kind of going through some of the other questions and comments that you all had. There was a question about folks that folks are adults with disabilities or retired members of our workforce. Kind of been talking with our attorney and also just chatting with the folks in Winter Park. They do include folks with disabilities can apply, as well as folks that are retired members of the workforce. And our attorney said, yes, that probably makes sense in terms of fair housing. So I think we'll probably be looking to include that and kind of work through, if somebody has been, worked in Whitefish for a certain amount of years and is, retired here, will be available to apply for assistance. And then when I talked with Winter Park, they said they don't really get a whole lot of folks that are retired that are applying, and then maybe one or two folks that are disabled per year that are applying for assistance. So I think there probably be a small minority of the folks that will be applying there. There was a question about seasonal workers that you all had. Really, we're just going with the average of about 32 hours per week. Per week over the course of the year. So 1,600 hours per year. So we're just kind of looking across their employment. This isn't necessarily for folks that are just here for 3 months and then they're gone, but there are a lot of folks that will have seasonal jobs. It might not be in one full-time position throughout the year, but they are seasonal workers. So by going with the total number of hours per year and kind of the average throughout the year, we're really looking to have that taken care of. There was a question about month to month and people that might be on handshake agreements. This is something that we are still working through on what type of landlord agreement we can utilize. I think what we've talked about is having, essentially landlords agree to keeping rent consistent for a 12-month period or however long that the people are applying for assistance. So I think that's pretty reasonable if somebody's going to be applying for this. So we're hopeful that's going to probably be a little bit of conversation with property owners, landlords as we're going through this. So we're still getting some feedback on that. Administration, we did add a administration line to the budget that you all have seen, 3.5% of the total, as well as some one-time setup costs. So that's like $10,250 out of all of it, just to cover our staff time and just kind of the annual operating for the program. And we'll potentially adjust that, kind of seeing how this first year goes. There is the conversation about city limits versus the zip code. I know we had a big conversation about that in the work session. I think we're really just probably going to have a wait just for city limits. I know there are some comments back and forth. I think we're open. I think my board, we had a lot of discussion about, well, if somebody just lives right outside the city limits but works in the city, should that be weighted differently if they live across the block? So I think we're probably going to go with what's in the legacy homes, which is city and then zip code. But I think we're still open to kind of finalizing that piece there. And honestly, it's probably going to depend on what those applications coming in that first cycle are looking like to help inform moving forward. In terms of some of the matching funds, we have received a $25,000 contribution from the Chamber of Commerce. Also, the Explore Whitefish, we have a new MOU with them where they're going to be giving 50% of the Community Sustainability Fund towards housing whitefish. Internally, we're allocating another $25,000 from Explore Whitefish. And then we'd really like to go out and fundraise for that additional $50,000. We do have some internal funds through our annual giving campaign that we can also contribute, but we are really looking to raise those additional 50 as new dollars through grants and just through other donor stewardship. And then in terms of timeline, we are kind of this month finalizing the application, finalizing all of our outreach materials, getting some more feedback from community members that will be applying on just some of the back and forth on what this is going to actually look like in practice. Our goal right now is to be reviewing applications for the first round March 31st. So that gives us a nice long runway to get the word out in the beginning of the year, kind of go through any kinks that the application might have online, and kind of go through any questions. So those are the changes. The following slides here, which I won't go through and you have, are just kind of the current and updated program policies and procedures and some examples. But happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thanks, Daniel. Any questions for Daniel on his report? Ben?
Just one. When would you start?
When will we start?
Yeah.
Well, so in my head right now, the timeline is that we'll kind of do a official launch, hopefully January 15th. Press releases, website live, application live. And then we're saying we'll accept applications and then start reviewing March 31st for that first round. And then it will be quarterly after that. We're not doing the first come, first serve. We have a weighted system that we're working through right now in terms of how those funds will be allocated. So prioritizing based off of economic need and then also cost burden. So those are going to be higher weighted. And then we're kind of going through the other pieces right now.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I know this was a pilot program, but I really like the stability that you guys have put into it. It feels like it will really work.
Yeah.
So thank you for all that, especially since you're on paternity leave, aren't you?
Just back.
Oh, you
Yes,
are?
thank you.
Okay. Well, congratulations, too.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Daniel? Giuseppe?
Daniel, thank you for your work in driving this. Are you thinking of using this money from the city as a bridge to when in 25 the organization will start receiving the 10% of the 3% resort tax?
Well, we are not. I think we certainly will apply down the line for the resort tax. Are you asking for you said the CVB, the Explore White?
No, I was talking about the voters already voted.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to be able to access, and hopefully by that time we have shown that it's hopefully not a pilot anymore, but hopefully a successful program, work through some of the kinks, and I'd love to come back and be able to access some of those funds for the program when that time comes.
Okay, I understand. I thought that you could use that 10% in different programs and you didn't have to ask us anymore. So
gotcha.
My misunderstanding. The other question is, you talked about retired people and disabled people, and I agree with you. How are you going to manage the 32 hours minimum per week? If I'm retired, I might work 10 hours 1 week, and I might not make the 1,600 hours.
Yeah, so it'll be, I suppose in that instance, it'll be you are a full-time worker or, not an and, or you are a disabled, adult with disabilities, or you are a retired member of the workforce. So there won't be ands on that.
Thank you. And last question is, if I understood it well during the work session, is this money that the city is devolving to the Whitefish Housing Assistance Fund predicated upon a match? You were talking about matching, meaning if someone gives $20,000, then you tap for $20,000 out of this $200. So we are incenting the community or the other organizations to donate, because then the donation gets doubled with the money from the taxpayers.
Really, how we framed it is that we'd like to raise $300,000 in this first year. The city has given the commitment for at least $100,000, and then once that is spent, an additional $100,000 can be allocated. And we just said that we'd like to raise a 50% match for that, so $300,000. And so we've already raised $50,000, and so we are looking to raise the additional $50,000 to kind of meet that match. So it's not like a one-to-one. The city contributes this much, and then we're gonna be able to bring in that. So it'd just be that kind of matching, 50% matching that we're looking to raise. Yep.
Further questions? Steve?
I don't have a question for you, Daniel. I just want to say how exciting it finally is to hear that that some of the hard-earned money that people have put into this town is going to go back to those who need a place to live and otherwise couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
thanks for getting this off the ground, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll be collecting data. We have some questions on the application that will be voluntary, but we're hoping that people will ask just to get some more data on how long they've been here, or they have goals for home ownership. So really trying to get a better picture. One thing that we are working on and is just trying to connect with as many renters. So if any renters are listening, we're just looking for as much feedback as we can get. Just, we've talked to a lot of people that are running programs and doing similar things, but just the more that we can hear from folks that will be applying is going to be really helpful. So that's one thing that over the next month, we're just going to continue to collect that information and make little tweaks as we need.
Anything further? We do need a motion, don't we, Dana?
So I'd like to just give a little update on the staff report
Sure.
you have in your packet, and more about the MOU specifically. So
Great.
tonight, obviously, you've heard from Housing Whitefish, the update that they provided from the work session. But in your packet is an MOU that we've drafted, that staff's drafted and provided to Housing Whitefish to review, that details out the program and then what reporting requirements they have. So just wanted to highlight that they will be reporting to us funds committed and expended, households served, and other significant data of importance that we find as we move through this pilot program on a quarterly basis. And then the request is to have an annual review of the funding criteria and policies, and provide council the opportunity to have input and approval of any significant changes. And then, as our standard, if we're giving money, we have the ability to review financial records to make sure they're being used properly. We also in here provided the plan of compensation. So the first $100,000 would be paid within 30 days of execution of the MOU, or agreement. I keep saying MOU, it's an agreement. And then after that first $100,000 is expended, we would then, upon request, fund the additional $100,000. So the only thing I would make comment of is that we did include as Exhibit A the Whitefish Workforce Assistance Program with some minor tweaks that Daniel mentioned today regarding retirees and those with disabilities. I would say in the motion to approve the agreement, which is really solidifying your funding for from the city's perspective, is to also mention the guidelines and criteria and requirements as presented this evening, and then we can make that adjustment to the agreement prior to signing so that we have the final guidelines attached to the agreement.
Great. Thanks, Dana.
Yep.
Ben,
Shall I make a motion?
please.
I would move to approve the Whitefish Workforce Assistance Program and MOU as presented with the clarifications and adjustments coming from the podium and from Dana.
Thanks, Ben. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Daniel, thanks very much. I also want to give a big shout out to the Chamber Board as well as Explore Whitefish for your generous contributions. It's much appreciated. Takes partners and we're going to get there. So
Yeah.
thanks very much.
Thank you all. We're excited.
Yep. Congrats. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry it. I didn't forget. What's up? We'll move on to item 4 of our agenda. I do have a proclamation to read in honor of or acknowledging Arbor Day, and I'll read that proclamation now, if you don't mind. Whereas natural trees, landscapes, and natural areas provide not only community beautification, but also economic and environmental benefits, and whereas trees provide many benefits to the community, including air purification, windbreaks, noise reduction, shade and energy savings, and whereas planting trees and maintaining older trees provides an opportunity for community interaction, volunteerism, economic development, and environmental conservation, and whereas our efforts to improve the environmental benefit present and future generations, and whereas Arbor Day in Montana is officially the last Friday in April. Therefore, be it resolved, I, John Mulfeld, Mayor of Whitefish, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day, and I encourage citizens to participate in appropriate activities and to take advantage of the benefits of our wonderful parks and other natural areas in our community. And thanks very much to our Parks Department for making that true. Anyway, that shall be our Arbor Day. We'll move on to communications from the public. We do have a few public hearings scheduled for this evening. If you're here to speak to those hearings, please wait until I call them individually. Otherwise, if you have anything to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity. Any public comment this evening? Deputy? Always.
Richard Hillner, 104 5th Street, Whitefish. First of all, congratulations to Councilor Quinnell, Councilor Sweeney, Councilor Norton, and Mayor Mulfeld on your election to City Council. It was, I think, late in 2011, early 2012. I had just been elected to City Council, and a constituent stopped me and said, do you think, the snow was all over the ground, and do you think you could get City Council and the city to stop plowing the bike path because it's hard to walk on after they've plowed it because it's so slick? The point is, you're not always going to make everyone happy, either individually or collectively. I think that the next 3 years for this council are of the utmost importance. You're beginning the review of the growth policy / plan, and that will involve not only our community, but you as well. And I implore you, as you work through this, to keep in mind that our community is more than our home. It is a place of our heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, very much. Appreciate the comments. Further communications from the public? Anyone online, Michelle, by chance?
Those of you attending online, if you'd like to raise your hand, I think it's Sherry, and she might be here to present. Nope. She's just listening in, I think. Sherry, do you want to say anything? I think we're good.
Okay. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing it. How about the council? Giuseppe? Oh, I didn't see you, Rebecca. Sorry.
I just wanted to mention that this isn't an actual committee, but I'm thinking later it might be. Justine couldn't make it tonight because she had some personal things, but maybe in January to give us kind of an update on where we are with bear management.
Great. Appreciate the follow-up, Rebecca. Giuseppe?
Yes, you made me feel bad that I cut a Christmas tree 2 days ago. And now it's Arbor Day, and I feel awful. But the report is about our meetings and our works with the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. As you know, we've been long working, trying to find ways to proceed to complete or to find the light at the end of the tunnel with the River Bend, for lack of a better word, trail bit and the Malmquist trail bit between the bridge and pretty much the railroad. And we are at a point where we had agreed that we had the money allocated for the applications to FWP. It's called Form 124. And we're going to proceed, the staff was going to proceed with that. But this morning, after further discussions, we all agreed with the staff recommended, the board voted unanimously to, instead of doing two separate Form 124, one for that bit or Riverbank Condo and one for the Malmquist bit, it would be more synergical, probably economical, and impactful to go with only one Form 124 for the whole trail. And so we voted, and it's already, there is no request for money. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it. And if you had anything to the opposition of it, let's talk maybe after, during comment. If not, that's what's happening.
So it's my understanding FWP won't consider a pre-application. I talked to Craig about this until the final design's complete. Is that in process? And what's the timeline for submitting the SPA 124?
So the discussion at the Bike Ped meeting this morning was that rather than try and do the two paths separately, one is a 310 that Malmquist would do with the Conservation District, and the second would be a 124 that the city would do with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. We could kind of take the path to nowhere argument away from that if we do it as one project. During our meeting with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks earlier this month, Kenny, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks staff sort of alluded to the fact that there's a little more give and take with a 124, and with a 124 you also sort of get alternatives planning through the department, and so we think that it'll be more efficient and more likely to be a permitted project if it goes together. And so the thought was that I'd put together a staff report and bring this to council in January, really for kind of a head nod. But right now, staff is working under the guidance of council that we, one, proceed with the conceptual design of the elevated trail, two, work with the HOA, and three, work on the permitting. So our intent with meeting with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks was to try and get that pre-application so that we at least had, if nothing else, some type of an indication from them to work on the easement with the HOA, but not getting that, I think the only alternative is really to move forward with the permit.
So is a concept design sufficient for SPA submittal?
It's still going to be conceptual in design, but it needs to be further along than it is right now. Okay. So we will have additional design dollars to spend with TD&H. We'll need to tell Fish, Wildlife, and Parks the number of, helical piers, the material type, more design on the railing, and, exactly how the project will be constructed. But I don't anticipate it will be fully designed, ready to go to bid.
So since the Malmquist property is private and requires a 310, how can we umbrella that under a 124 given we're a government entity?
Yeah, so I think the intent would be that the city would bid the entire project and pay for the entire project, and then we'd have an agreement with the developer that we'd be reimbursed for their share, or
Okay.
for their portion of the project.
That makes sense.
You have an easement on the plat for that, that has been dedicated to the city, so.
Okay, so it'll just be a 124?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks for the update. I think we're going to wait for January for the staff report. Is that correct, Craig?
Well, I guess we could do it either way. That was the intention, but
Whatever your prerogative is.
if council's comfortable.
I apologize. If we're not concerned about any red flags, it will say 1.5 months if we, and time for the staff, because they can proceed without waiting for us until January. If you're okay.
I'm great with that. Please proceed with the motion.
I'm actually not okay with
No,
that.
okay.
I'm sorry. I think it needs to be on the agenda. I mean, to be fair, we haven't even spoken to Casey Malmquist about the possibility.
Okay.
Take that back.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I really think it needs to be on the agenda. I think there's a lot of, with an agreement with Casey, I think there's just a lot of public interest on it.
Sure.
So, and I want to move forward as much as anybody, but I do think we need to talk to Casey about it too before we start committing Casey to things he doesn't know about.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Angie.
yeah.
Thanks, Craig. Rebecca?
I just wondered, when you're talking to Casey, could you actually bring up the idea of him donating land to the city so that it would be, like, easy? Like, if he could donate, even with the easement, if he gave the city that land?
I don't think he needs to give, I mean, the condition of the CUP was the trail, and he has dedicated that easement to the city. So I don't know what other land Casey would be interested in donating or that we would want.
Okay.
Further volunteer board reports. Steve?
Since it came up tonight, I just want to fill you guys in a little bit about the old planning board, and the new community development board. I don't know if all that came out when we voted on the resolution to create the new community planning board, but we did not, we had a meeting in October, the planning board had a meeting in October, at which time we decided to dissolve the planning board, and wait until the new year, until we could get the new community development board together, so that then the new board will be tasked with the growth policy, because that's the big concern, is the growth policy. And we didn't want to have this kind of inept planning board start the process and hand it off to the community development board. We wanted just this new board to start fresh. So I think, Ben, your question in the meeting earlier about where are we with the growth policy is that we're still pretty much at square one. We have a website that Alan has created, taking input there, but we have not held a formal public hearing where people can make comments or do any of that kind of stuff. All that stuff is coming in the new year. Hopefully February we'll be starting that process. That's about where we are with it right now, is in my understanding. Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong there.
We did have a public meeting of the kickoff meeting in late August, and then we had visioning sessions scheduled for November, which we then postponed those until February before this new board can meet. We are still working on the growth policy. We're doing all the background information, existing conditions data, putting together stuff that we have to do for it. So we're working on it, but the public portion of it is still to come.
Thanks, Steve. Further reports from the council? Not seeing any. You do have the consent agenda with the November 20th special and regular meeting minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
And I second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously, Michelle, which brings us on to our first public hearing of the evening, which will be Resolution 23-40, establishing an increase in the public usage fee for vending at Whitefish City Beach 4th of July events. Maria.
Good evening. So each year, the Parks and Recreation Department recruits vendors for the 4th of July celebration at City Beach. On average, we have around 7 vendors who set up booths in the parking lot to sell food and drinks to the thousands of attendees who attend for the fireworks show. Parks and Rec does manage the applications for vending at this event, and we charge a fee for that service. That fee has historically been $75. This rate has not changed in over a decade, and the reason that I know that is because I inherited the rate when I became director, and I was not able to find any history of when this rate was set or if it has ever changed. So I'm saying it's at least been a decade. Staff did research comparable events and their associated fees, and those comparisons are in your packet for your review. And you'll see in that there are many communities that charge a percentage of sales, but staff's recommending that we stay with a set fee, but increase that to $150 per vendor. The percentage of sales are they're more common in reoccurring events like farmers markets, and collections on percentage of sales are more administratively time-consuming because it does require a lot of follow-up with each vendor and evaluation of their sales. Although the proposed increase is double the current fee, it is comparable, if not less, than vending fees for similar events within our state. During the regularly scheduled November 14th Park Board meeting, the Park Board did unanimously recommend the approval of the fee, and the implementation of the proposed fee would not require any additional financial resources, and I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Maria. Any questions for Maria on her staff report? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on this item. Is there any public comment this evening? How about online, Michelle? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Steve?
Move that we approve Resolution 20-40 to adopt, to implement an increase in the City Beach 4th of July vending fees.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, I think it's actually Resolution 2341.
23,
We just did 2340.
We did? Okay. I can never keep track.
I know.
It's 40.
it's 40.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought we just did 40.
No, we're still on the first item.
Okay, you're right. Never mind. I stand corrected
And I
again.
think Giuseppe had the second to the motion. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously as well. Michelle, which brings us to item 8B, which will be Resolution 23-41, approving business registration fees, formerly referred to as the business license fees. Dana.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So earlier in this meeting, you actually adopted, under the second reading, the ordinance moving our business licensing program and provisions to a business registration program. So this proposed resolution is going to implement the fees related to the business registration program. We have prepared an analysis to determine the cost of services to operate the business registration program by business type, considering both labor, staffing costs, and other operating costs. We also looked at short-term rentals specifically and the cost of our enforcement program and assistance for performance standards. As you know, we are working on hiring a new short-term rental specialist / code compliance officer who will be available for our short-term rental businesses. And that's one of the costs that is included when calculating the annual fee. The updated analysis did result in 2 proposed changes from what our current business license program provides. One is we did add a new fire inspection no-show fee, which is proposed at $55 per occurrence. We have experienced numerous situations in which businesses, primarily short-term rentals, will schedule a fire safety inspection. Our fire marshal will go to meet them at the business location, and nobody will show up, and so they have no access to the facility. So that is really wasting our city resources and staff time, and another appointment is still required so that they're in compliance with our performance standards. And so we wanted to make sure we had a cost for that no-show fee, because your annual inspection fee, or your annual business registration fee includes one inspection only, one on-site visit. We also, when reviewing the different costs, there was a one-time $50 initial application fee for short-term rentals. And looking at where we had staff time, we did determine that that one-time fee should be eliminated. Really, that the cost that to the city on a revenue basis and support of ongoing services is minimal, since any of the 350 we already have registered, they've already paid it once, they don't pay it again upon renewal. And so there's minimal impact from that. So really, there's no financial requirement related to the adoption of the proposed fees that are set by resolution for our business registration program. And all associated costs with those programs are covered under the annual fees. It's important to note that under Montana law, we are allowed to assess fees for a program like this to recover costs only, so we can't be punitive or excessive in those fees. That's why we did a cost of service study to view hourly rates, hours spent, including software and other operating costs. So with that, staff respectfully recommends that the City Council adopt the proposed resolution approving business registration fees, formerly referred to as our business license fees.
Thanks, Dana. Any questions? Giuseppe?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Dana, thank you for this. So I'm looking at page 110 of our PDF packet. I'm sure all of us are looking at that. And I have a question for you, two questions. Number one, when was the last time that we defined the fees that I find on the current business license fees as an increase or as a new fee? Was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
So the last time we updated our business license fees was in 2021.
So in 2021. So if I look at the new fees, the proposed fees, am I correct that with the exception of a $55 inspection fee in case it was needed because there was no availability, and actually with a decrease of the initial fee for the application of the short-term rental, am I correct that we are not changing any single fee for businesses in town?
That is correct. And because we did a very close analysis and looked at exactly what individuals are making now, obviously it's something that we will review on a few year basis to make sure that we do adjust with wage increases. But we had enough time and the wages actually worked out well to where we're still within that few-year window where we don't have to increase fees.
So if business owners ask us, we can say since 2021, we have not increased the business fees, and that's an honest statement, correct?
That is correct.
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you.
Further questions for Dana? We did advertise for a public hearing on Resolution 23-41. Is there any public comment? Michelle, anyone online? Go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve Resolution 23-41, a resolution approving the business registration fee, formerly referred to as the business license fee.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well. Michelle? Which brings us on to 8C, which will be Ordinance 23-30, amending Title 13 of our Lake and Lakeshore Protection Regulations of the Whitefish City Code, and this will be on a first reading. Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is kind of a long time coming. We've put together a major revision of our Lakeshore Protection Regulations. They were last updated in about 2009. Since that time, we have some better science going on about how to address shoreline erosion. In the past, we've allowed riprap and retaining walls, which we now know, and I think we knew back then, but they do tend to scour the beach, reduce biodiversity, push all that wave action onto neighboring properties, and really aren't very healthy for the lake. And so we're sort of changing the mode of our regulations to encourage bioengineering and soft structure armoring for erosion control, and make riprap and hard armoring, such as retaining walls, a full variance to be able to do that. And so we worked with Dr. Mark Lorang at the University of Montana Flathead Lake Biological Station, as well as Mike Kupel at the Whitefish Lake Institute. Reviewed our regulation changes and gave us great suggestions. I really appreciated all their input. And so basically the bioengineering is going to be the standard method of addressing that stuff. I won't go into all this scientific detail, but I'm going to let you know that we did have quite a bit of other changes within the regulations that I'll go over, and then after I go over that, I'll go through a couple slides that that we put together, and from Kurt Baumfeld, who put together the design for some of the 4 existing dynamic gravel beaches on Whitefish Lake. So some of the other changes that are being proposed are we replaced most of the graphic figures in there. I think that the old ones in the Lakeshore regulations had been photocopied about 60 or 70 times in the copy that we have. So we got some nice clean graphics now. We had to add a bunch of new definitions and revise some definitions. Some of the new terms that we've introduced and things like bioengineering and dynamic gravel beaches and those types of things needed definitions, so we included those. The way the regulations were laid out, it was kind of unclear at the beginning of the chapter which things weren't allowed with the permit, which things required a full permit, which things required an administrative permit. So we completely revised how that works, so it's really easy right up front to see whatever you're going to do, what kind of permit that you need, instead of having to go through the whole regulations to figure that out. As far as administrative permits, we put a 30-day calendar timeline on that, which seemed reasonable from the application period, so that those things would get out when someone turned them in. We had to clarify some things about dead and endangered trees. one of those things where, everyone, because cottonwoods dropped a branch, they must get chopped down because they're dangerous. Well, that's not always true, and cottonwoods are a native tree. So we had to add some additional regulations that kind of clarified some of that stuff. Mike Kupel suggested adding something about any mechanical equipment having a fuel spill kit on hand, just in case if they're using, a bobcat or something in the lakeshore protection zone. We added a section to allow staff to require an as-built survey when someone had questions about impervious surface on the property or where the lakeshore protection zone was, that we could, make them go get a as-built survey. We added a thing in there about tram rail systems not being permitted, that we would require a variance in the lakeshore zone. You can come down right outside the lakeshore zone, but you can't be in the lakeshore zone. As far as public and private boat ramps, we added a requirement that they have aquatic invasive species inspections. This might raise some issues with some of the private boat ramps around for certain areas. We envision that they would figure out some sort of a system where they go out and get an inspection and have a sticker on their boat, so they don't have to staff it all the time. Or the HOAs would be responsible for figuring out how to address that. But even if it's not something that easily attainable, it's something very necessary for the lake, that we protect it and make sure that those inspections for those invasive species are going on those private boat ramps, not just on City Beach and State Park. We added some changes to our swim beach restoration standards. Based on the science, Mark Lorang advocated that, sand and gravel is really good for a lake. It provides habitat. It's not bad to add it. And so in the past, you only got one swim beach application of gravel, one time ever, and we changed that to once every 10 years. It seemed like a reasonable amount of time. Somebody adding it, that they could reduce it. We didn't want to leave it unlimited because there's people that would come and have beach gravel dumped every single year. We, of course, added some more language about soft structure armoring, bioengineering, dynamic gravel beaches, wave breaks, all making those the preferred method of erosion control. And then, as I mentioned, riprap and retaining walls, filling and dredging, all those things require a major variance. Added some additional safety measures for sewer lift stations and fuel stations. We updated our buoy placement standards, and there was some question about the no-wake buoys that have gone up in the lake, and our existing regulations require a buoy permit for any kind of a buoy, and there's kind of a lot of unregulated buoys going in that a lot of people have been complaining about just because it affects navigation. And so we just made it clear that that does require a permit, and and it can only be out 100 feet from the shoreline. We added language to prohibit inhabited houseboats from being anchored and moored on the lake. Might be sort of controversial, something the Lakeshore Committee was very concerned about. There had been some rumors about a potential property that didn't have road access, putting some kind of a houseboat up there. I don't know how they deal with their sewage effluent and things like that. So we're suggesting, a full ban on that. And then other types of boats, they can, someone has a sailboat and they want to stay in there for a few days. We just made it so that can't be occupied more than 7 days. Again, it's mostly out of concern for how they're addressing any kind of sewage. We added a new requirement for water lines in the lake, that the preferred method be that they be horizontally bored underground rather than trenching through the lakeshore zone. It's a new technology that's out there where they can just basically start outside the lakeshore protection zone, bore all the way down under the underground, come out in the lake, and it doesn't impact the shoreline at all. There are some instances where that might not be practicable. There could be some rock or some things down there that they can't bore through. So, you still can trench, but it does require a minor variance to go through that process. We had some language in our non-conforming structures that was not consistent with our floodplain regulations. Almost all those non-conforming structures are in the floodplain, and so the floodplain regulations would trump that anyway, so we made that consistent, where a substantial improvement is 50% or more rather than 90%, which is how it had been. And then finally, our variance criteria were updated, so we're now requiring noticing of adjacent neighbors when any kind of a variance, minor or major. And just as a note, Mike Kupel brought up that F&H Surveying used to monitor the high water on the lake, and the Whitefish Lake Institute has been doing that, the last few years, and he noted that the historic mean low water and mean high water has changed by a couple inches over the years. But due to the fact that we've required every lakeshore protection, or every person has property in the lakeshore zone to stake their lakeshore protection zone based on the existing 3,000.79, we just didn't really feel like it was fair over 2 inches to have all that change and have, people having to move their stakes and having a surveyor come out and do all that stuff. Seems reasonable to continue that the way it is, so. Just based on there's a slide up there currently right now that kind of shows the science. This is from Flathead Lake, one of Mark Lorang's section lines. It just kind of shows how those things are designed, where they use gravel substrate under the surface out in the, below the high water and the low water out into the lake to create a actual gravel wave break, so it dissipates that wave action way before it hits the shoreline. Michelle, can you go on to the next slide? So this is for Andy Fury's benefit, and he is not here, but every meeting where we've talked about this, he's asked Kurt Vomfeld about how some of the different projects around the lake have, there's been 4 of them so far that Kurt Vomfeld, he's a landscape architect, has designed with Mark Lorang's help on the lake. They're both, there's 2 of them next to each other on one side of the lake, and 2 of them by Glenwood on the other side of the lake. So this is on Skiles Place. This is a before shot of this 300 Styles Place, and Michelle, can you go to the next one? Just another shot of that. This is how the shoreline was, and then keep going, next slide. So this is after they added the dynamic gravel beach, and what they had to do is basically slopes, because that seawall, wherever there's a seawall, it changes where the mean high water is. If you were to remove that, because that mean high water goes part way up that seawall, there was no way for them to remove that thing, and the Lake Shore Protection Committee and you guys granted them basically a variance to keep that in there, but to add this dynamic gravel beach. And so that dissipates the wave action before it gets to that seawall. And the next slide, please. And again, this is another view of it. It's just, sloping gravel down out into the lake. Next slide. And this is the property next door, a similar thing. Go ahead, Michelle. Next slide real quick. So that's the new beach on, that Bailey property, which is the next one down, 302 Skiles. So next property, now we're moving down to Glenwood. So this is a beach along Glenwood. You might recognize there's a big giant yellow retaining wall that used to be there. This is before the dynamic gravel beach went in. Next slide. You might remember that giant yellow wall. It's hard to miss that if you're ever out in a boat on the lake. So what they did was they decided new property owner decided to get rid of this retaining wall, and basically they had to come up with a solution. So they used a combination of stone placed in the lakeshore zone with riprap substrate underneath there, then gravel, and then sand on top of that. And then next slide. And then the other direction, they basically stacked it up with the same type of thing, but then soil over the top of that. So it's basically a vegetated riprap that goes right up to where that seawall was, and they had to kind of change that slope in there. After they installed this, there was a huge storm on Whitefish Lake, and Kurt said they had to go back in there because a lot of the topsoil washed away, and they had to kind of redo it again. But it's one of those dangers that until the plants start really, flourishing and their roots go down, that topsoil is vulnerable. Next slide, please. So with the straw wattles and all that stuff, that's just to kind of protect it as it goes forward, and then, but it's obviously a much more aesthetically pleasing and hopefully a better ecologically sound thing than that giant yellow seawall that was there in the past. Next slide. So Kurt provided some sections of some of these different projects. This is the Bailey project that was at 302 Skiles. Just getting technical of how they designed that. Go ahead and go to the next one. That's where the existing seawall was with the stairs going down, and how they installed that on there. Next slide. And that's just a typical section of what it would look like, and how the things are organized. So just kind of wanted to go through that. So we took this stuff to the Lakeshore Protection Committee on November 8th, and then at that time, Kurt did give a presentation to them with these slides and went over that stuff. He was not able to be here tonight because he's traveling. So following the presentation, the Lakeshore Protection Committee did unanimously recommend approval, and staff does recommend approval. And there's a lot of stuff in the attached ordinance. If you want to go through any of the specific sections or have any questions about some of the changes, I'd be glad to talk about them. but I didn't want to go item by item through there, just as a courtesy to your time.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave? Frank and then
Just-
Steve.
I'm just going to say I'm pleased that you changed the name of Lost to Lost Loon Lake. Thank you.
Steve.
Dave, I have a question about 13.2-1A3, that is on page 127. Number 3 there reads that without limitation, the following activities when conducted within a lake or lake bed are examples of work for which lake shore construction permit is required, which must be reviewed by the Lakeshore Protection Committee. And it says construction, installation, or additions to docks, and then we added over 60 feet in length, including gangways. Does that mean that anything under 60 feet, I don't need to have a permit or go through the
No, it goes
Lakeshore?
to, it's an administrative approval. So this is a full permit, so this is where we moved things around into the standard permit. So we're not changing how it's done right now, anything that's over 60 feet, because that's the limit. Then you have to have a full permit if you want to go over 60, because you have to basically show with a depth profile that your water's too shallow. And so those types of permits go through the Lakeshore Protection Committee and to the City Council. But dock permits, if they're 60 feet or less, staff reviews them, make sure it meets the qualifications of the code, and then we issue those permits administratively without it going to the planning board.
Okay,
Or
and that's the way it's
Lakeshore
always
Committee.
been done?
Yep.
It was just hard for me to tell whether that was a new
Yeah,
thing
so
or
we
not.
just, again, had to kind of change this because it just listed all these different things you could do and it didn't explain which ones were administrative. That was all in a different section, and so
Okay, all right, thank you.
that's what I changed around.
Further questions? Rebecca?
Dave, so this is only for our part of the lake shore, and the lake is entirely ours, but then there's a county section. So do you think it's worth presenting to the county planning board the changes in these regulations with the hope that they might model something like this?
So anything that's below the low water mark is all within our jurisdiction on the lake. So any dock or any buoy or anything out in the lake is in the Whitefish's jurisdiction. Certainly things that happen on the shoreline, above the high water mark within the lakeshore zone, this only applies in city limits. At our Lakeshore Committee meeting where we presented this, the county did send one of their planners to review it, and he has a copy of the regulations. The county has, been looking at it. They haven't offered any feedback. We can certainly, once the council adopts it, send a copy to the, county commissioners or the county planning board, suggesting that they review these and possibly amend their regulations to include some of these things, but.
We should at least think about including them in updating their regulations to match ours. Just because we've had so many problems, I think we could at least say that we did it.
Right, and the county's lake regulations would apply to all the lakes in Flathead County. They don't have specific ones for Whitefish Lake. So just a FYI on that.
Yeah, I remember going to those meetings, but I still think we have the right to protect our water supply.
Further questions for Dave? We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 23-30. Any comments this evening? Toby? You signed up.
Yeah. Greetings. Toby Scott, 1478 Barkley Lane on Whitefish Lake. And I find it, I don't know whether it's serendipitous or what, that I happened to come to the meeting tonight and to see that this ordinance is on there. And I can tell you that if you think Dave gave you a lot of information, we went through this resolution item by item. I think it was several hours. But the staff did a wonderful job of revising what was probably years-old regulations and bringing them up to date. And I'll tell you, if it wasn't for the staff, we would probably still be using the same old regulations, what they went through, and they did these. And as I am the planning board representative and the chairman of the Lakeshore Protection Committee, I urge you to vote in favor of these.
Thanks, Toby.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around. Further public comment? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Frank?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve Resolution 23-42, a resolution to establish, 2330, an ordinance to amend Title 13 Lakeshore Protection Regulations of the Whitefish City Code.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you bringing that forward. We'll move on to Resolution 23-42, establishing a fee for childcare for city employees. And this is a relic from our past meeting. Maria.
Good evening again. As we discussed during your November 20th work session, Parks and Recreation has been providing scholarships for summer camp and after-school programs to families in our community based on a sliding scale. And in accordance with state guidelines, in order to be considered affordable, child care costs should not exceed 10% of a household annual income. And our sliding scale fee does reflect that policy. However, we have found over the years that oftentimes city employees fall within an income range between this federal guideline for poverty and the federal definition of affordability, leaving them less likely to receive scholarship funds to offset the cost of childcare due to our limited scholarship funding. As you know, the City of Whitefish strives to be a competitive employer who provides excellent employee benefits, a healthy work-life balance, and strong employee retention. And we know that consistent, reliable, and safe childcare reduces parental stress, results in higher records of attendance, and allows them to be more focused, productive, and dedicated employees while at work. At the work session, staff presented 3 affordable childcare options for your consideration, and both the Park Board and City Council directed staff to move forward with proposing option 3, which provides childcare to an eligible dependent, children of city employees as defined by our personnel policy and health insurance at 0 cost to the employee. The financial impact of the policy is equal to the cost of 1 additional counselor per 10 children attending the program. For this fiscal year, that cost is $13,680 per 10 children. I, along with the Whitefish Park Board, do respectfully recommend that you adopt this resolution, and I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Maria. Any questions for Maria? I would entertain a motion, please. Rebecca.
Yep. I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 23-42, a resolution to establish a fee for child care for city employees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion?
Nope, I'm really happy that we're getting this done. And thank the staff for bringing it, but I also feel like we would benefit from expanding the program for everybody in the city at some point too.
Thanks, Rebecca. Steve?
I just want to go on the record and say that I'm going to remove my opposition to this.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. You have Dana's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Dana on her manager's reports? Dana, anything additional to report on?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that we know last meeting was a lot of public comment about the short-term rental enforcement position. We have created a job description. We are titling it the short-term rental specialist and code compliance officer, so that to make it clear that it's not just about code compliance, but it's about education and being a resource for our short-term rentals to learn about our performance standards, as well as going through the business registration program. That individual will be responsible for reviewing those requirements. So we have that classified and ready to go. So we anticipate that being posted in the next couple of weeks. However, given the holiday period coming up, likely interviews won't occur until mid-January, and we anticipate onboarding this position likely in February.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Dana. Well, yes.
Dana, in your report, it says on Tuesday, December 21st, the annual Haskell Basin, was that supposed to be November 21st? Or was that, were you?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it hasn't
was-
happened. It was November. Thank you for catching that. It was right before Thanksgiving that the Haskell Basin Conservation
Okay,
Easement
that's what I
Liaison team
thought.
met.
All right,
Yep,
thank you.
Thank you.
Steve?
Dana, I just have a question. I saw in here that you met with the Wave Board. And I've long had a concern about the Wave and the way that they treat other nonprofits that use their facilities, particularly swimming, just because it's the one that I'm most intimate with. And I just wonder what kind of leverage or what kind of massaging, if any, that city can do. Because right now the swim team, they practice from 7:45 to 9:45 at night, which is pretty darn late for teenagers to be. I mean, they stay up late, but they're not usually out exercising at that time. And it's also it's in the middle of winter too, which can be hazardous because not all the kids live like my kids, less than a mile away, but not all the kids are. And Sea Falls also uses the pool during that time as well. And I've tried to have conversations in the past with them. We used to be able to do a swim meet in January there, where it was a big community event, where we had several high school teams come. We had senior recognitions during that time. It was a really fun event on a Saturday, and they've taken that away from us as well. So now we do it on a Friday night, and they're even pushing us to not even do that. So, it kind of irks me that and these are all nonprofit. I mean, I've helped raise money. The people sitting around me have given money to the swim team in the past. And I just wonder if there's any leverage we can, or just get in somebody's ear to say, hey, these are other nonprofit organizations. You're operating on city property. Is there anything we can do about that?
So it's interesting you bring that up. In our lease agreement with the Wave, actually it calls out that the Parks and Recreation Department should be able to utilize the facility as needed for their programs. We are also getting pushback from the Wave management regarding our use of the facility during their busy times. I will say that membership at the Wave has just grown and grown year over year. So I understand the challenges of managing the crowdedness of the facility, so many memberships. But I do know that Art will be bringing this up at the board meeting December, I might have put it in there, December 21st. That's probably the correct December 21st. December 21st at the meeting with the board. And I think that there is potential that this could become a discussion between council and the Wave board or Wave management. We have been asked to adjust our programs to avoid their busiest times as much as we can, and we've tried to work with them on that. And it's important for us that, if we don't have access to that facility, we're still able to run our programs, but it's very nice to be able to utilize that facility when we can for basketball camp or swimming a few times a month in the summer with our summer day camp program. So I have started that conversation from the city perspective. This is the first time learning of another nonprofit experiencing that. There is more control that they have over nonprofit use than city use, just because that's explicitly listed in there. But I think it's definitely a conversation that will come forward to council soon.
Okay, thanks. I guess I'll wait before I send another nasty gram.
Further questions for Dana on her staff report, manager's report? We'll move on to item 10C, consideration of appointing members to the rating panel and the selection committee for the wage market study. And the request is to appoint Sherry and Michelle to the rating panel, and then again, Sherry and Michelle and one city councilor who would be willing to the selection committee. Dana.
Thanks. Yep, so that's the basic wrap-up. Under our consultant selection policy, this study technically does not meet the financial threshold to require a selection committee or selection panel or selection committee. My goodness, I'm getting those screwed up. Rating panel or the selection committee. But in Sherry and I's discussion, we felt that it's very important that we have a counselor on this committee because this study is going to show what the market rate compensation packages should be for the city, and that's going to be somewhat binding on council if we're here to pay market rate wages. So with that, we would love to have one of the elected officials be able to participate. We are anticipating the interviews to be done in January, if I remember correctly. Oh, I don't know, actually. I might look that up real quick. I can get that date while you guys discuss who might want to participate.
Any volunteers? Volunteer, I should say.
I can do it if,
Okay,
unless somebody wants to.
comfortable with that?
Yeah,
Great.
I am.
Just need a motion to that effect, appointing Sherry and Michelle, as well as Sherry, Michelle, and Frank to the selection committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Davis. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 11A. We do have appointments to volunteer boards and committees to make this evening. You did make your appointment to the Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore Protection Committee. Michelle, I just wanted a little bit of clarification here. So in terms of the Housing Committee, there's 4 positions with 5 applicants, is that correct?
Correct.
And Aaron interviewed at our last meeting, correct?
Correct.
All qualified. I guess I'm going to get some input from the council on this. So we have Lynette, Roxanne, Aaron, Cameron Blake, and Carolyn Pittman. I feel very strongly that Cameron and Carolyn should be appointed, which leaves 2 additional vacancies. Do you have any preferences between Aaron, Lynette, and Roxanne?
My preference would be Roxanne.
Roxanne? Great. And then Lynette or Aaron? Is anyone familiar with their backgrounds?
As the chair of the
Yeah,
committee,
please.
I'll opine. I mean, I've been on this committee for a long time, even before it was in its current form, and I feel like this committee has, when we revamped it, is much improved. I think the group that's there, to me, is a good group. I appreciate everybody that's there and the different perspectives. I think Leonette brings a lot to the table in terms of advocacy. I mean, she is the advocate, one of the very few of this in this town, and I'd be hesitant to see her leave the committee. Mr. Wilpert, I think, seems very knowledgeable, and I hope he would continue to help the city in other ways should he not be appointed here.
Great. Well, these are my appointments. They just need to be ratified. I'll go ahead and appoint Cameron Blake and Carolyn Pittman as the member-at-large real estate development and member-at-large fundraising respectively to both 2-year terms, and Lynette Galaz as a member-at-large for advocacy, and Roxanne Gallagher for member-at-large housing advocacy as well for 1-year appointments. Showing of hands. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the Whitefish Community Development Board. We had 5 positions. And excuse me, we also need to appoint, or I need to appoint representatives from the nonprofit partnerships, correct, Dana? Is that correct?
We were discussing,
Oh, that's.
can you repeat your question, please?
I was just curious, do I need to now appoint the representatives from the nonprofits?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
so I'll go ahead and motion to appoint.
And 1 council member.
Okay. Who would be interested in serving on this board? Ben, please? Are you still in?
I volunteer.
You volunteer, Ben. So I'll go ahead and appoint Dwarren Hawkins from the Whitefish Housing Authority to a 2-year term, Daniel Sitter, the Housing Whitefish, for a 2-year term, Rhonda Fitzgerald for a 1-year term representing the CVB, Jeff Raper from the Chamber of Commerce for a 1-year term, and Councilor Ben Davis for a 2-year term. Just showing of hands, please. Ben, thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it. We'll move on to the Whitefish Community Development Board. I'm going to go ahead and appoint Toby Scott to a 2-year term, John Middleton to a 2-year term, Whitney Beckham to a 1-year term, and Phil Boland to a 1-year term. And I just need a showing of hands to ratify that appointment.
I would switch Beckham and Middleton. Just,
I understand
for a lot
that.
of reasons, but yeah. That's my only suggestion.
I'll take your suggestion. So we'll change that for John will serve a 1-year term and Whitney a 2-year term. And just, you okay with that, everyone? Showing of hands, please. And that's unanimous as well, Michelle. Thanks, council. That brings us on to our last item, or 2 remaining items. You do have a letter from Tischler Biss. Any comments on the letter? We addressed this evening. And then finally, a letter from Nancy Schuber filing a City of Whitefish ethics and conflict of interest complaint. And I'm going to turn this right over to Angie. And my question, Angie, have you investigated this? And are we in any harm pursuant to Montana code with what transpired?
I have investigated it, John. I actually started my investigation when Nancy first raised the issue in November. Just a quick recap of our city ethics policy. Section 3, which was alleged to be violated, says no public official shall vote or otherwise takes action with respect to any situation in which he or she has a conflict of interest. Section 6 says public officials, which by the way does include city council members, shall not directly or indirectly accept a gift or economic benefit similar to a gift greater than $50 in value, including but not limited to non-monetary gifts such as food or drink, from or behalf on any individual or entity who has an application, matter, issue, or request pending before the public official, or from whom such public official knows will have an application, matter, issue, or request pending before such public official in the foreseeable future. So Ben's donation to Steve's campaign of $250 was disclosed on Steve's finance report filed for the time period from April 20th, 2023 to August 14th, 2023. Steve recalls he received the donation on August 10th. Ben's donation to Frank's campaign was the same amount, $250, was disclosed on Frank's finance report filed for the time report from April 27th, 2023 to October 13th, 2003. Ben didn't even actually submit his application for planned unit development and a rezone until August 31st, 2023. Planning staff notices the planning board and city council of applications, but that was not done until September 29th of 2023. So Ben, the point being is, Ben didn't have an application pending when Steve received the contribution or when Frank received the contribution. I know that Steve wasn't aware of Ben's application until he actually received the planning board packet, which would have been in October, probably October 19th. And I had a conversation with Frank, and he said he actually wasn't aware of it until the city council packet the following month. All that being said, I do not think that they had any cause to believe that Ben would have an application pending in the foreseeable future. I think you guys are all aware Ben was very close-lipped about his project, even to me. I knew something about it, but not very much. So I do not find that there would have been a violation based on the language of our ethics policy. Further, and I think perhaps more importantly, is Montana law actually states like, and it's the statutes governing conduct and ethics specifically state that campaign contributions reported as required by statute are not gifts or economic benefits tantamount to gifts. And the reason behind that is pretty clear. As council members, you individuals have the right to your own political beliefs as long as you're not using city funds to espouse those political beliefs. And making a campaign contribution that is your own personal political beliefs tantamount to a gift really would foreclose you folks from being able to express your own political beliefs. So, even if for some reason Steve and Frank had a crystal ball and knew what Ben was doing when they accepted the gift, the campaign contribution, it's not a gift under Montana law. So those are my findings for whatever.
Are you going to go ahead and write those up formally just so we have that on record? Because I'd really like to just put this to bed and move on.
When our ethics policy doesn't call for it, it's only if you find a violation.
Okay.
So I guess I would just stand on the public record of what I just said.
Great. I'll defer to your opinion. Any comments on this matter? Rebecca?
So I didn't think this was really appropriate for Nancy to do this, but because when we run for office, we do sign statements saying that we'll not disparage our opponents. And I feel like it was used intentionally for that purpose right before the election. We always keep campaigns separate from what we do up here on the dais, and people have the right to support the candidates of their choice. We're Americans, and we have that freedom. And but the other piece of it is when you run for office, you also look at how other people run their campaigns. So all of us that were running at some point probably looked at other people's financial documents on the Commissioner of Political Practices site, which is what every public person posts things. So it's unfortunate, but I don't think it even really is an ethical query that's has any merit at all. But I'm glad that Angie went through it, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Angie. Thanks, Rebecca. Who would like to start tonight with comments? Giuseppe.
I'll start. I love to wish Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody, and enjoy family. I personally am going to find myself very thankful for where I live and the community I'm in. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Steve.
Just want to echo Giuseppe's comments there. It is a special time of year for all of us, and I'm going to miss you guys in 2 weeks without having a meeting.
Really?
And just for the record, we would have had a planning board meeting that week if it had come up, but we don't have a planning board anymore. So, no, anyway, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody. I look forward to working with you all again next year and for the next 4 years. So thanks. And then the other thing I just want to say is thank you to Glacier Nordic Club for getting the trails rolled already up in Haskell Basin, or part of them anyway. And I'm looking forward to some more snow so we can get out there and cross-country skiing. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Frank.
Nothing additional.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Frank. Ben.
Nothing to add.
Rebecca.
I got myself into trouble again on Facebook by talking about snow removal. Sorry. I mean, you never think things are going to blow up about like benign things like that, but I just wanted to remind people to clear their sidewalks. But anyways, so I was wondering if Dana and then Maria can address it, because there's 3 different standards. One, downtown has its own standards. The city has 2 areas that they're already aware of that we might need to pay more attention to. The second one is residential, and the third one is our trails system. So could someone just tell the public what's right, since I might have not told them what's right? And then I have one more thing.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. We did put a notice out on our city website regarding snow and ice removal. The business district is required to the owner or tenant of an adjacent sidewalk is required to have the sidewalk or shared use path adjoining or in front of their property free and clear of all accumulations of ice, snow, and slush, and it shall be freed from the night's accumulation. So there is an expectation that be cleared in the morning. That is our business district. Residential properties, it is within 24 hours of the end of the snow event, is how that's been interpreted, to have your sidewalks cleared. And I will say we are starting to receive complaints, and we are working on following up with those property owners in accordance with our city code as they come in. And I'll turn over the trail maintenance, since that's a parks function, to Maria.
As far as paths go, it is actually the adjacent property owner's responsibility to clear even bike paths, but to the width of a sidewalk, because we recognize that clearing a much wider section could be arduous. So that is within 24 hours of the event. On our main routes, like Highway 93 South, 2nd Street, Highway 93 West in Wisconsin, we assist property owners with the clearing of that snow because we know that they are high traffic areas, but we also have many paths that we need to clear. So we ask that the adjacent property owners assist us in doing, keeping it clean after we have gone through and cleaned the sidewalks or the bike paths to adjacent property. We have multiple routes, and we are out to clear snow early morning, but we may not get back to that same route in the same day. It may be the next morning before you'll see us on that same section again. That's just a time constraint and how many paths we have to clear, which is why we ask for a little help from the community as well. And I'll also add that if anybody does want to report a path that needs to be clear and they don't know whose responsibility it is, they can just submit it to our problem reporter, and we'll figure out where that needs to go.
Thanks, Maria.
And then just to reassure the public, we're not out to collect fines from everybody that doesn't clear things. That's very rare that we do that. It is a possibility if someone's really horrible. But
Yeah, they'll get notice by letter and have 7 days to address that issue.
yeah,
But we-
legally, okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you, guys. I'm sorry I messed up on all that, too. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is I sent our Human Resources Directors did a survey of getting stipends for the mayor and the counselors. And then I was also looking at like the childcare and insurance and the waive membership and phone reimbursement. And the suggestion was to ask for a work session in January if we could get enough people interested in pursuing that with the potential of getting it on a June ballot. It does need to get changed in the charter. Some of those things don't have to, but the payment for a stipend for the mayor and the counselor. And the reason why I'm bringing it up a lot is because I want people that are younger, that might have to work 2 or 3 jobs, people that have childcare duties. I want everybody to be able to run for office if they have leadership abilities, and it might help people be able to do that. So would you guys support that?
Showing of hands, comments? At
Work
least-
session?
Yes, Giuseppe?
If we're discussing about a ballot in June, can we somehow discuss that item that about the resort tax rebate being 5% to all property taxpayers, only 5%, because that's the law, and then the remainder to be allocated to the residents, either renters or property owners? So that could be a good ballot. We say, we want to get paid. We want, because it would be for the next whatever. We want to get paid. By the way, if you're a resident here, you're going to get more in rebate in property resort tax. And I shared the numbers when we had that conversation.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Steve?
I would just ask if we have enough time at a work session to address both of those if we're talking about both.
I like Giuseppe's idea.
I do too. It's been a long time coming.
As long as there's 4 in the mayor, or maybe it's 3 in the mayor, to have a scheduled work session, I won't be here, and I will have some direction to Michelle on how I view the actual administration of that resort tax proposal. Also with the concerns of bringing up a vote less than a year since. I think we have to look at if we can ask the question on resort tax that quickly, because I think it has to be only once per fiscal year. And if it's in June, that's within the same fiscal year. That's my one concern on the resort tax. So it might not be eligible for this next special election, because I think you can only ask once in a fiscal year to change it. But I'll look at that code again. But we can still hold a work session regardless.
Showing of hands in support of holding a work session? Okay, great. Anything further, Rebecca?
Oh, just try to find some peace this dark season. And if you can help other people out, that would be great too. It's been wonderful to serve with all of you, and I'm really thankful to the public for re-electing me.
Thanks, Rebecca. I have nothing further. Anything from staff, Dana?
I have nothing.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned. Happy holidays.